Welcome to Real Women. I am Catherine Meeks. Sarah, I know you have so much experience. I mean, you've had different careers and you've worked with young women in a variety of different settings. So before I kind of want to dive in and ask you these questions, do you want to give us a little bit of context and background of your experience with this community population of young women?
Yeah, definitely. My undergraduate is in high school education. I thought I was going to be a social studies teacher at a high school level. And so a lot of my background in education was working with high school students, which I love. And then God has kind of moved me in a different direction and given me the opportunity to also get my master's in theology. And so through both of those educational experiences, I've had a lot of opportunities to work with high school students and particularly share the faith with them. And it's always been on my heart because high school was such a hard time for me. With my faith, it was such an opportunity to grow in faith and so many opportunities to walk away that it's really been on my heart to work with the high school girls in particular and to help them understand the truth about their dignity and about God's love for them. So a lot of great opportunities to see the need and to be able to hopefully answer it in small ways.
Fantastic. Well, okay, so True Beauty Revealed, thinking of this topic, why do you think beauty is such an important thing to discuss with young women?
I think our culture talks about beauty a lot, but it's not in healthy ways. You know, we have the magazine images of beautiful women that are all photoshopped, that set up standards that are not realistic for our young girls to try and attain. And so when we set that standard of beauty up, it sets our young women up for failure, which is detrimental. And we also see this over-sexualization of girls at a very young age. If you walk into any clothing store, you see toddler clothes that are short shorts and crop tops and clothing that, I mean, I as an adult wouldn't even wear, but we don't need to be putting on our 5-year-old girls. And so it's just this climate of talking about beauty in a way that isn't helpful or healthy. And beauty is intricately tied to who we are as women, right? We are the crown of creation, right? Eve was the last thing that God created, and he said it's very good in the original creation story. And so there's something about us as women that is supposed to inspire and be beauty to the world. And so we need to help young girls recognize that they are beautiful. That it's not by the standards of the world that they are ordained as beautiful, but by being themselves, they bring beauty to the world that the world needs, and to help them understand what true beauty really is.
No, completely. You talked about some of the challenges that young girls face, and we were chatting a little bit earlier. But very specifically, what are some of the attacks that you see that young girls are experiencing, the attacks on their own feminine dignity? And from what age range are you seeing these kind of start to evolve?
The world doesn't have a real understanding of dignity in the first place. We tend to talk about self-worth. And worth is a difficult word because worth goes with value, which is mostly a monetary thing. We assign value to objects, right? I can barter about my car's value with you. If you were going to try and buy my car, and I might think my car's actually a piece of junk, but I might think it's worth $6,000, and you would look at me and say, Sarah, your car's only worth $2,000, like if that, right? And so we can barter about the value, and it's something objective that we can assign to an object, right? And so we tend to have that idea of human life and human dignity as well, that it's something that we can assign to a person, that especially in our modern world, their usefulness and what they bring to society is how we define their dignity. And that's not the way that it's meant to be. Our dignity is a God-given gift because we're created in the image and likeness of God. And it's not something that can be taken away or changed. And it doesn't have anything to do with what we bring to the world, aside from being exactly who God created us to be in his image. So it's not something that we can change or strive to attain, but that's not the message that the young girls are hearing. And I think it starts from a very young age that as they're taking in media and the world around them, girls are starting to hear this message that they are only as good as how they look and what they do. And so many of the young girls that I worked with were striving for this idea of the perfect them, that if they, were the captain of the soccer team or looked exactly like the model, that then they would be happy.
Yeah.
And that doesn't bring them true happiness. It brings them eating disorders. The number of girls that I've worked with who are struggling with eating disorders because they want to look like they think beauty is astounding.
And it's really that common.
Yeah. I wish I could remember some statistics right now, but it's so prevalent in our culture because it's the quick fix that we want to be what the world tells us is beautiful, and we're willing to sacrifice our bodies for it, basically. This understanding of beauty drives young girls to do drastic things because they don't understand who they were created to be. And I think that goes hand in hand with when they understand their dignity and they can live it out, they bring their own beauty to the world in a very unique way as God has called them to.
Absolutely. Okay, so understanding, so these are the different, touching on these different things, you have so much experience, and if they do what you just said, if they do understand their dignity, they can really understand the beauty they bring to the world. But how do you and I and our audience and women who have daughters, sisters, nieces, teachers, whoever it may be, how do we help them really understand their dignity, especially with all these, media and distractions and, standards on billboards? How do you practically do that?
Yeah. I think the first step is just to talk to them about it. Because if they're not hearing it from you, they're not hearing it anywhere. It's not something that the world is going to talk to them about. And so it has to come from the women in their life to talk directly about their dignity as girls and to affirm them for who they are. And the second part is to live it out yourself. We live in a culture where even us as adult women, we face the same standards of beauty and the same misunderstanding of our dignity. And so if we're standing in front of a mirror and our daughter, our niece, is looking at us as we're picking apart the pieces that we don't like of our bodies, it sends them a message. And it tells them that our bodies are something not beautiful, not worthy of respect or esteem. And I think even in my own life, I've always had an understanding of modesty, but it hasn't always been the correct one. And modesty goes with dignity because when we have a correct understanding of our dignity, we want to dress in a way that shows that. So for me, growing up in high school and in college, I was a lot heavier than I am now. I weighed quite a bit more. And so my understanding of modesty was that I dressed in modest clothes because I didn't want the world to see me. That my body was something to be hidden and shouldn't be shown, so I dressed in clothes that were modest. And that's not an authentic understanding of modesty because it doesn't see our bodies as the gift that they are, as beautiful. And so I think we need to help young girls understand that their bodies are beautiful and that dressing in a way that is modest is not about covering up something that's bad, but showing something that is good in a good and positive way. And so helping girls understand that in the way that we talk about our own bodies and the way that we dress and invite them into dressing as well. And it's challenging. I don't know, most of my sisters are grown up now, but I remember shopping with them and trying to find even shorts that are not super short. And shirts that are actually modest. It's a challenge, but something we need to model.
What is the most urgent or worrisome threat to a young woman's faith?
Uncertainty in their identity, not knowing who they are called to be, trying to live in two worlds without knowing who they really are. So maybe trying to go to church on Sunday but not practice their faith in their social lives. And that usually means giving in by certain attitudes, certain decisions. Maybe they're over 21 and they're in a social, like a bar scene. That world is going to be very different than the world they're going to be meeting when they go to Mass on Sunday.
What would be your advice to a young Catholic girl?
Don't give up. Listen to your conscience. It will guide you in the long run. And if you're struggling with wanting to fit in or be a part of, that moment will pass. And when you really are with the people and the place you're supposed to be, you will feel so full of life that you'll look in the mirror and not understand how you've been given so many gifts. And that's worth waiting for. And
I remember when I was young, so I'm very tall.
Yes.
And I think I remember it was like 4th grade and I went shopping with all my friends and they're still in like Gap Kids. And because I was so tall, the lengths, I had to start going into like 00s and 0s, which are small sizes, but I was so devastated because I had to go into adult sizes and my friends made fun of me. And I felt so much bigger. And I just still remember that. And now looking back, it's like, that was ridiculous. But the pressure we feel to kind of be the same as everybody else too is tremendous.
I think that's something that's hard for young girls, especially in the middle school and high school ages, is that they do want to be like everybody else. And so it's the message of dignity and the message that the church tells us about being women is that we should be who God creates us to be, and that is unique. And so in the middle school and high school level, when we just want to be accepted and be like everybody else, it's hard for them to hear that exactly who they are right now is exactly what God wants.
Completely.
And so it's a hard message for them to hear, but it's so important.
Yeah.
for them to take in.
And then we grow up and we all want to be different,
Right.
right? Being a tall redhead, I was like, please, I just want to be a brunette, like
No.
normal height. And now I appreciate it in different ways. But
Being a normal height brunette is not,
oh, it's great. You can go wear the heels and
That's
you know,
true.
all the fun stuff. But no, we're all so different. Okay, so understanding that, but I'm curious in your perspective, what are the bigger ramifications? So here it's like, how do we help girls understand their dignity, but why is it so important? And thinking, at one school or one community, but thinking more globally, even as a culture, if women don't understand their dignity, what are those ramifications, and why is it so important that we get this message across?
Yeah. The church will talk about how the woman is the heart of the family and the heart of society. And if a woman doesn't understand her own dignity and her place in the world and the influence that she can have, and if she's not living to the full extent, then the whole of family and society suffers.
Yeah.
And we are called to be the one that lead the way. And the quote from Archbishop Fulton Sheen about women being the level of civilization that a man has to aspire to be worthy of her, that if women aren't living out their dignity and the fullness of the virtue that they can, then there's nothing for men to aspire to be worthy of.
Yeah.
And so when we lower the standards for ourselves, or we don't see the way that we impact the world, then the whole society suffers, because it needs our gifts, particularly as women, to have that understanding. And I think one thing that's particularly for the young girls hard is the concept of friendship. I don't know about you, but for me in high school and middle school, friendship was a tough thing, because there are all the cliques and the bullies and the gossip. And so many young girls struggle with that, especially in the modern world with social media and the cyberbullying and the texting. There's so many opportunities to tear each other down.
Yeah.
And when we don't understand our own dignity, it's really hard to see it in somebody else.
Yeah.
And that creates the culture of the bullying and the gossip, where when we want to tear each other down, which doesn't help build this culture to be a culture that affirms dignity in each other.
Completely.
My life right now, because I'm not called to be a mom physically right now. Women have the beautiful gift to see the other and to will their good in a beautiful way, and to be able to share our faith with them. To have an intentional thought in mind of being a spiritual mother to the younger women around me, to live out my faith and invite them in a nurturing way. The capacity for others is not just a physical thing. Obviously, it's built into our biology as women that we have a space in ourselves for another soul, but it's mirrored in our soul that we have a feminine body and a feminine soul.
Jesus is God. Jesus is Lord. Jesus has the victory.
We all have a call to greatness, a desire for it. We want to do something good.
Now is your time. You could change the world, and the world needs changing, so get busy.
Shalom World, God's own channel.
So here we're talking about how can we help girls understand your experience, but if you were talking to a young woman who was sitting right here with us, what would you tell her as a practical way that she can really kind of build a culture to enhance human life? I mean, here she is knowing that maybe she's cyberbullied, maybe she's having trouble with friends, figuring out her self-esteem and her value and beauty. What would you tell her, and what do you think is just something very practically she can do in her day-to-day life at that young age to kind of help this global picture be enhanced?
Yeah. I think it's twofold. The first step is to go deeper in her faith, to understand Christ's love for her, to trust that he loves her, and have that understanding of her own dignity come through that. As a daughter
so I'm
of
going to
God.
back you up a little bit though. Okay, so as soon-to-be parent and so even that, practically, how do you help a girl understand her faith? Because so many girls would say going to church is boring, or they just go to socialize with their friends. And again, it's baby steps, and then there's an intimacy in their, or an infancy in their faith. But how do you even help them understand Christ's love? What's one practical way that you have seen that really work well?
I think, for me at least, the most practical thing was the witness of another. And so for you as an expectant mom, to witness the faith to your child, to let them see you pray, and let church not be a punishment, but something that you're excited and that it's so much a part of your daily life. There's this understanding that faith isn't something that's optional or something that's just an accessory of life, but that your faith is part of your everyday life. And really, anytime I work with somebody that's going to be working with high school students, the thing I say is you have to let them know that you love them, because they're not going to listen to anything you say until they know that you love them.
Yeah.
And so that's the first step, is to start by loving them exactly where they are, so that they can build some trust with you and be open to God's love. Our world is so broken. There are so many young girls that come from broken homes that haven't experienced authentic love. And so we have to start there. We have to start with loving them right where they're at and helping them be open to receiving God's love.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. Okay, so now we've addressed the young girl, and I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but for mothers and grandmothers who are watching the show and are thinking, even in my own experience, it's always like, can you help my daughter? Can you talk to them? Can you do this retreat? Just kind of any kind of lifeline of helping them in these situations. But what would you say is a practical way that they can really help their daughters understand their dignity? I know you mentioned, being a good witness, but what about using other tools as far as community or getting them involved in healthy things? Is there anything that you can build upon that before we wrap up today?
Yeah. I think helping them understand what true friendship is, so that they can build community. Because it's one thing to see your parents living out the faith, but it's another thing to see your peers doing it. For me, that was what translated my faith from being my parents' faith to my own, was having a group of high school students who were actually living out the faith. Made it something attractive that I wanted as well. And the same thing in college, that it was the people my age that were living out the faith in a beautiful, authentic way that helped me desire to make it my own as well. And so I think as a parent, oftentimes we're a little bit hands-off with friendship, but helping your son or daughter find a place where they can build those authentic friendships, whether it's inviting them to go to youth group or helping them find a team that has that. I think it's important to invite them to find the friends that are going to build them up, that are going to be friendships of virtue, that help them grow in holiness and are an authentic witness for it. And Endow has a program called True Beauty Revealed. It's our high school study that's great, that goes into all of these topics in further depth and really hands-on, so that they can come to understand for themselves what their dignity is and where it comes from.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, Sarah, you so beautifully kind of articulated why it's so important for women to understand their dignity, and then practically how we can do that in our culture. But we always love a good story, and I know it's something that, I've struggled, you've struggled, so many girls struggle in these different ages. It's kind of inevitable. But I also know that you come from a great, big Catholic family in Denver, and I know your faith is so beautiful, and you're doing what you are doing now. So what would you say either you wish you knew, or the tools you were given in some situation when you were younger where you felt like your feminine dignity was threatened or your self-esteem was low? How did you, as a young girl, get out of that situation, and how does that affect you now, thinking of being a mother or working with these young women?
Yeah, I think what was really beautiful for me is the way that my mom was right there with us as high school girls. She led a couple Bible studies for me growing up in high school, and she was very clear about our dignity. And so for me, even with all the mixed up messages from the world, it was very clear from my mom that our dignity was beautiful and worthwhile, that there was this understanding of being loved, and she was very clear to articulate God's love for me. And it's beautiful because my mom is a convert to the faith. She was actually raised Protestant, and before she and my dad, who were high school sweethearts, got married, she converted to Catholicism. And so part of my faith journey was actually watching her faith journey, that because she was very new in the faith and had a lot of questions and wrestled with some of the things, I got to watch her go through that. And the authentic honesty with which she was searching for her faith and trying to grow closer to God was a great witness for me. And watching her understanding of herself as a woman was really beautiful as well. That to watch her grow as a mother and give, and kind of spiritual motherhood that we talk about. It wasn't just me she was leading a Bible study for, but my friends as well, that some of them came from broken homes, some of them came from great Catholic families, but others came from homes where their mom wasn't always around. And the way that she loved them. My brother just graduated from high school, and some of my friends showed up at his graduation party, even though I wasn't there, because my mom and my dad have welcomed them so much into the family that they feel loved, and they will come to my little brother's graduation party even when I'm not there. And I think that that is one thing that for me growing up, this understanding of being loved was a beautiful gift, that I grew up knowing exactly how loved I am. And my mom did such a great job of showing that to me and of living her faith and striving for holiness in a very authentic way.
What is the most urgent or worrisome threat to a young woman's faith?
You know, I have a 16-year-old daughter, and I would say that society is the biggest threat because they are so bombarded with worldly things and the way that the world thinks, and that when they act virtuous or when they try to do something that they know is what they're supposed to do, they get persecuted, they get looked down upon, people don't get it, and they kind of become the outside.
What would be your advice to a young Catholic girl?
It's a phrase that my daughter and I always say, and it's nice doesn't mean good, especially when applied to boys.
All right, I have one last question. So now you're director of programs for Endow. You work with women across the country. You see so many different realities. I know I just saw you in San Diego and in Houston and all these different places. But since you've worked in Endow, how would you say it's really helped you in your own faith and understanding the, what JP2 calls the feminine genius and true beauty? And we talk about this idea of spiritual motherhood too. How does that all wrap in together, and how has it helped you grow as a woman in faith?
I think the biggest thing for me since coming to Endow has been the freedom to be exactly who God created me to be. Obviously, I've had an understanding of my femininity and my faith, but this understanding, because of John Paul's writing on the feminine genius, that there's a lot of freedom in that for me, that there's never one thing that we're supposed to be.
Cookie cutter?
Yeah, exactly, but that he's inviting us and giving us particular gifts as women to serve the world. The capacity for others is not just a physical thing. Obviously, it's built into our biology as women that we have a space in ourselves for another soul, but it's mirrored in our soul that we have a feminine body and a feminine soul. And so as women who aren't physical mothers yet, we're still called to the spiritual motherhood that you mentioned. And for me, there have been a couple women in my life that have really lived that out, and at the time I didn't know the term. I didn't know what spiritual motherhood was. But looking back, I can say they were acting as spiritual mothers to me. And the first was a woman named Monica, who worked as the campus minister at CSU when I was in school there. Mm-hmm. And she was unmarried and a fabulous campus minister. But she's the one that really invited me back to my faith and worked as that spiritual mother in my life, inviting me back and drawing me in and nurturing me. And that was a beautiful witness of spiritual motherhood for me. Mm-hmm. And the other woman was a woman named Kay. Kay is married to her husband, and they were never blessed with children of their own. And so because of the extra time she has worked in our youth group and has just poured herself out in the lives of the high school students. And I was actually out of college already and back working with the high school students, but she was still a spiritual mother to me as well as the high school students. And she moved down to Arizona, and the students were so sad because it was like losing a mom, that she had just poured herself out into their lives and helped them grow in the faith so much. As women have a beautiful gift to see the other and to will their good in a beautiful way and to be able to share our faith with them. And I think for me it's been a great example of how I can live out my life right now, because I'm not called to be a mom physically right now, living the single life. And so to have an intentional thought in mind of being a spiritual mother to the younger women around me, to live out my faith and invite them in a nurturing way. A lot of my friends have moved to Denver and aren't originally from there. They don't have their families around. And so even though they're my own age, how can I, help build that community and give them a sense of family?
Yeah, loneliness is such a big thing too. I think that we are so busy in our culture that so many women are lonely. So to be able to step in and have that capacity to see where they need help and love is beautiful. Well, thank you, Sarah, for all of that. It's an inspiration to me, and I know, Sarah here is so humble, but she's the perfect witness for giving herself away and being a gift to others. And just thanks for everything you do for these young women.
Thanks, Catherine.
Yeah, so thank you for joining us for our show today on Real Women, and we hope to see you next time.